Welcome to the NASCAR DFS show for today's race. Phil, man, how you doing, man?
Good, Jason. How about yourself?
Oh, man, I cannot complain. Man. Nice little afternoon here in Tampa, man. So doing all good, man. So, obviously, by the way, it's first day producing, so just trying to make sure everything is working correctly. So, hopefully, everyone can hear Phil. So, if you have any problems hearing Phil, just let me know there in the YouTube chat as try to make sure everything is working right here. But of course, a lot of things to take in. Of course, no road race this week. That is something definitely I know probably makes you very happy, but. First off, I was looking at one of your articles there at Awesemo.com, and one of the things that you said was roster construction on DraftKings, and saying how you need a minimum of 2 dominators on DraftKings, and let me just kind of get your take of why you view this way, of why you need to have 2 dominators.
Right. This goes back to my basic idea that, the best way to think about NASCAR DFS is as a sliding scale. As the amount of laps change and as the track changes, you adjust what you're doing with your lineups. If you try to stay static every week, sure, it may hit some weeks because you landed on the right combination, but then the other weeks you're going to find yourself with either too many dominators or not enough. And then, of course, that messes what you're doing with how many place differential drivers that you're doing. So we go from a 65-lap race at a road course from last Sunday to a 311-lap race, 311 miles here at Dover, which is I guess you would basically call it a bigger version of Bristol, if you would say. In fact, Dover is kind of its own thing on the Cup Series right now. There's no other track in that same length at a mile that has the banking that it does. You either have to go up to tracks like Homestead or Darlington, or you go down to a smaller track like Bristol. So Dover's kind of its own special thing. So we've got 311 laps around this high banked oval. Because of the 311 laps, there's that many more Dominator points available than there were last week. So when you boil things down, you're looking at a 2 Dominator build across DraftKings and across FanDuel. Normally these races, and I pointed this out in the preview articles, that if you're trying to base your lineup construction off of these past Dover races, you're probably doing yourself a harm, because these past Dover races were always 400 laps, 400 miles. So, we're subtracting 89 laps, which will, impact Dominators. In previous Dover races, we would have looked at 3 for sure. But since we've backed this down to 311, I think you're safe if you look at 2. But if you wanted to, outside of cash on DraftKings, you could look to 3 Dominators in your builds.
In terms of roster construction on the other DFS sites, is it same, similar, a little different?
Yeah, I think at a minimum on FanDuel, you're still gonna need 2. But really, the only times that you ever go with a 3 Dominator build on FanDuel is when we go to a place like Martinsville, a place like Bristol, where you're looking at 500 laps. A week like this on FanDuel, whether you're playing cash or tournaments, and especially with guys like Blaney, Austin Dillon, Kyle Busch, these guys in the back, it's just not going to be advantageous to go after a 3rd Dominator on FanDuel. And, quite frankly, on SuperDraft, we can definitely make the case for rostering one of these guys in the top 10 as a champion selection, because there are so many laps led points on the board.
Of course, we appreciate everyone tuning in here on a Saturday afternoon. Hopefully everyone's Saturday is going well here. It was a little rainy early this morning in Tampa, but it's starting to clear up, so hopefully everyone's having a good weekend. Of course, we both of us would really appreciate if you hit that thumbs up button right here on YouTube. It helps us out a lot. Also, if you do have any questions, comments, you can hit them up on YouTube or on the premium Slack. We will get to those questions as we do go on. But one of the things that we like to do here is we like to kind of break this thing down into tiers. And using the DraftKings salaries in terms of this one, we've got 6 fighters, or excuse me, it happens, Phil. It happens. I can't. I seriously, I think I need to put a post-it note up here. Don't call a driver a fighter, even though sometimes they might fight.
Oh yeah, after today, they might be fighters.
Yeah, that does tend to happen. But so we got 6 drivers, if I can say that correctly, in Tier 1. So Tier 1 is drivers who are 10,000 and above. So we've got Ryan Blaney, 11.8, Kevin Harvick, 11.4, Martin Truex Jr., 11,000, Kyle Busch, 10,600, Kenny Hamlin, 10,200, Chase Elliott at 10,000. Of course, we've got the drivers that'll be starting 1, 2, and 3. And then Harvick in the 10th spot, Busch in the 22nd spot, and Blaney in the 20th spot. So when you look at these and thinking of your kind of general thoughts about this race, who is the one that is there 1 or 2, maybe 3, or maybe even 4 that stick out to you?
One, as soon as DraftKings posted salaries on Wednesday, I laughed to myself when I saw them make Ryan Blaney 11,800. Like, if something really peculiar would have happened last week, I mean, for the love of God, we were there with only a few laps to go, and Blaney was in 12th, and then somehow he fell all the way back to 31st. I'm still flabbergasted how he pulled that off. But regardless, if Blaney was starting in the 35th or worse, then we can make a case for this salary because of all that place differential. But I mean, we're talking at a maximum 19 spots. We have no real reason to believe that Blaney's going to be fighting for the lead based off of what he's done track history track history wise here at Dover. 6 races the last 3 years. He's only finished on the lead lap twice in those 6 races with an average finish of 20.7. So I mean, it's not like this history at Dover is baked into Blaney's salary. You are paying nearly $12,000 for a driver with fair amount of place differential. And especially when you compare that to Kyle Busch, who is $1,200 cheaper and has two more spots to gain. You know, as things stand, I don't think you can pay $11,800 for Blaney, whether you think he's a place differential driver, a dominator, or what have you. You know, quite simply, he needs to get to the lead, and he needs to lead a chunk of laps, get some fastest laps in order to pay off that salary. Kyle Busch is a bit more doable because of that depressed salary, and Kyle has a pretty good track history here at Dover, including a win and 4 top 10s in his last 6 races. But the guy that we're definitely focusing on is the pole sitter, Chase Elliott, 10,000. Chase has run really, really well here at Dover over his history. He's got a win back in the fall of 2018. And in my preview article, I said that because of the way that they're running the 750 horsepower package this year, that, you know, you really don't look to last year as the more comparable track. You look back to 2018. So, I mean, that's pretty good indication of what to hopefully expect out of Chase and the 9 crew today. And then you've got Denny Hanlon starting second, who, you know, he hasn't won here in the last 3 years, but he's run really well, 2 top 5s, 4 top 10 finishes. The laps led data, it says these are the 2 guys that you want. If you don't have the pole sitter that's going to lead the most laps, it's going to be the driver starting second. These guys are going to use the track position and the clean air to their advantage, and they're going to sit on the lead. Chase had this pole last year in this race, ended up leading the most laps, and then you go to the fall race in October, Denny sat on the pole and led the most laps. So you've got track history, you've got track position, everything that says these 2 guys should probably be the cornerstones of your lineup.
In terms of, I mean, you mentioned there about Blaney, what your concerns are there. Outside of Blaney, is one of the other 5 drivers that you're going to have to pay up for a concern? Or would you offer some concerns of what could not ultimately play out for you the way you would hope for when you're paying up at these salaries?
Right. Harvick being at 11.4, you definitely need him to probably lead the most laps in this race. And I mean, it's definitely on the board. Over the last 6 races, Harvick is averaging the most laps led at Dover in the field with 81.3 per race, 58.8 fastest laps, averaging just a tick under 88 DraftKings points, 83 on the nose FanDuel points. So, I mean, he has been so good, but the concern that I have with Harvick is when you look at the laps led data page on the race sheets and you see where the top 2 lap leaders are coming from, very rarely are they coming from a driver starting this far back. You are most part getting either the pole sitter, the driver starting second, or third or fourth. I mean, I can look here at all of these cases of these 12 races, and we're talking about 5 drivers that have started 10th or worse that have led the most laps or the second most laps here at Dover. I think it's so incredibly tough to pass drivers here at Dover. I think it's going to be a real work for Harvick to get to the lead, which is why I'm concerned about paying that 11.8 price for Blaney just the same. Truex, he's priced up, but he's priced up because of track history. He's got the best average finish in the field at Dover with 4.8 over the last 6 races. He's got to win 5 top 5 finishes. That's best in the field. Truex, I hate to say it, but if it isn't Elliott or it isn't Hanlon, then more than likely it's going to be Truex. Those top 3, because of where they are and because of who they are, they make the most sense as your dominators. And I believe that if you go to the top driver tool, that's who Alex has projected as the most likely to be today's dominators.
Yeah, and actually, if you look at those ownership projections as well, as I pulled that up, Chase Elliott is by far the driver that's bringing the most ownership. And, of course, if you want to get a Awesemo Plus weekly NASCAR pass, you can do that right now by going to awesemo.com/join. Get a NASCAR weekly pass for $9.95. That gets you access to driver projections, ownership projections, and the top drivers tool. I know for me, Phil, I'm always looking at obviously the top driver tool is something that I really look at. But really, I'm always looking at ownership. I don't care what sport it is. I'm trying to find out who is the athlete that I like, who may be under-owned. When you're over and you're looking at all of the premium tools that we have, is it the top driver tool that's kind of your go-to tool?
Yeah, because I always want to get a sense of where the field is going. And I mean, let's go back to last week. Brendan Gaughan. I mean, if the 70% plus ownership projection on Gaughan wasn't enough to scare you off, then everything that we talked about in the show should have been enough to make you say, yeah, maybe I can have a few shares in case he does well, but getting off of that train is probably in our best interest. And I don't know how many people I talked to in Slack after that race that said, God, I wish I just would have faded Brendan Gaughan. He had a transmission issue. There's no way to project those things. He'd been running in the 27th, 28th position compared to where he started. So he was on the verge of being good value, but, transmission gave way. He finishes, if it wasn't dead last, it was 38th, and he ended up being a big black hole in a lot of people's lineups last week.
Hey, we all have those stories. We all have those bad days where you're like, man, why did I put that guy in my lineup? But you got to check out that NASCAR weekly pass that we have for $9.95, and especially when you're trying to build your lineups for the races this weekend, it's definitely something you want to take advantage of. So let's move on to tier number 2. So these are the drivers that are in the 8,000 and 9,000 range. So we've got Brad Keselowski, Joey Logano, Eric Jones, Eric Almirola, Austin Dillon, Alex Bowman, Kyle Busch, William Byron, and Jimmy Johnson. I got to tell you, Phil, I'm in here last weekend watching the race. We talked so much about Alex Bowman, even though I was scared to put him in my lineup because I knew his ownership was going to be high. And then when I see his tire, I'm like, oh, son of a.
Yep, I did the same thing. I said, oh, for the love of God, if it was going to happen to anybody, it was going to be him.
Yeah, man. It's just look. We've all had that, but what in this tier 2? What is there one driver that sticks out above the others in your mind?
Probably for the sake of ownership, and let me go back here to the tool. The guy that I'm talking about, and everybody else has probably guessed it, is Austin Dillon, because he missed the race last week. He's starting back in 32nd. In fact, if Kaz Grala hadn't done so well, I mean, that was egg on my face. Kaz did a magnificent job of stepping into that car, driving all the way from the back, holding himself in the top 10, and probably did himself a good job of maybe getting a look from one of these lower teams for a ride next year. But if I look at ownership, go down here to Austin Dillon, 41.7%. And I mean, that's to be expected with a driver starting 32nd. And, quite frankly, Austin's probably a good $1,500, $1,400 more than he would be, had he not, had this position. So the question is, if you're gonna play Dillon at 40+% ownership, maybe even 50, and God, if we're talking about cash games, we're probably looking somewhere in the neighborhood of 70 to 80%. Can he hit 5x? So we're needing him to get somewhere in the 35 to we're needing him to get somewhere in the 40 to 45 point range. And if he can just maneuver through the field and finish about 12 to 15th, and he's got an average finish of 16th at Dover over the last 6 races, which suggests that he can do that. And he's been running pretty well before he had to take this break for the COVID-19 positive test. I think he'll at the very least scrape getting 5x value, and maybe even more. So, if we're talking about a guy scraping that value, yeah, that's good for cash, but he's probably a guy that you might want to get underweight on in tournaments.
Speaking of Austin Dillon, Chase says, is he a smash on FanDuel?
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason not to play Austin. He, FanDuel isn't playing this game that DraftKings is, where they're waiting for the starting orders to come out to play with salaries. 7,000 for Austin Dillon with all that place differential. I mean, it's simple. You go one of Chase, Hamlin, Truex, throw in Austin, and God, you've probably got enough salary left over where you could throw in Kyle because of this place differential, and then just boot your last position. So yeah, on FanDuel, Austin is a no-brainer.
We mentioned about roster constructions, and Chase brings this one up in this term of FanDuel. He says, more of a balanced build or a stars and scrubs? Would you consider 2 cheap guys like Ajoy, Dillon, Wallace?
Yeah, I think because you're placing emphasis on two dominators, and then you've got a driver like Kyle Busch at 11-2 who's going to give you a really nice place differential floor. And then you throw in Austin Dillon, and then you've got we'll get to these guys later on, but you've got guys that are underpriced, like a Ryan Preece, like a Ty Dillon, that are going to be easy ways to just to fill out your roster. Crap, for the love of God, Corey LaJoie is $3,500 this week on FanDuel. I mean, there may be some overlap this week because everybody else is going that way, but it's the path for roster construction on FanDuel that makes the most sense.
In terms of also another roster construction question, this comes from SuperDraft, is how many Dominators do you have to have on SuperDraft?
If I go here to my projections for SuperDraft, because of those 311 laps, you definitely can make the case for a Dominator as your champion pick. Like, I gave Chase Elliott 100 laps led, and playing him as your champion pick with those bonus points, that gives you 150.67 points. That's him starting first, of course, but finishing fifth. So he's going to lose a little bit of place differential. I'm not expecting Chase to win today. He'll ultimately fade in the final segment, but still, I imagine he'll score enough Dominator points that whatever he loses place differential wise, it's not gonna matter. When you start getting away from your champion pick and you try thinking about, okay, can I possibly play a Dominator as a flex play? It gets thin, because you are talking about a guy like Kevin Harvick, whose flex multiplier is 1, or Brad Keselowski, who's 1.05, Martin Truex, who's 1.15. I mean, you can even give these guys a bunch of laps led, but because of the multiplier system, it's so incredibly tough for them to match or outscore guys like Tyler Reddick or Austin Dillon or Daniel Suarez. It's something to keep in mind, that even though they're getting those bonus points because the laps led, their flex multipliers are so low that it really hurts their probability to be anything besides a champion pick.
With Logano starting in the 5 spot, does that concern you in terms of, where he could finish up if he's, finishes 10th, 15th? Does that concern you?
Yeah, and Logano's kind of on a list of drivers that I'm hands off right now, especially after he started on the pole and did absolutely nothing with it. I don't know where his team is right now, because let me just scroll over here. Yeah, he's doing all right. Going backwards, his finishes have been 9th, 5th, 8th, 4th, had a 35th at Kansas, and then a 3rd at Texas. You're getting top 10 finishes from Logano, but the thing that you're not getting is him actually getting to the front, leading laps, gaining fastest laps. So, if you're okay with 45 points from a driver that scores, from a $9,400 driver on DraftKings, then yeah, shoot, have yourself a day. But $9,400 for barely 3x, that's not advantageous.
Mm-hmm. In terms of some other drivers in this one, who is maybe when you look at our ownership projections and top drivers tool, is there one that you think it could be kind of a contrarian play at all?
Because of the nature of this track, it will be easy for drivers to get lapped. Probably within the first 20 laps, you will see drivers getting lapped. So a strategy that makes a lot of sense is moving, for obvious reasons, you're going to play some of these punt plays because they are just way underpriced. And what they need to make value or hit 6 or 7x, it's so low, it's stupid. But for the rest of your pool, there's an argument to be made about moving your place differential drivers within the teens. Picking some of these guys that, even though they're in the 8s or the 9s, they're a little more expensive than you would probably want to go after. Simply picking them because they start forward enough that they shouldn't be in danger of falling a lap down. They'll get points because of their finishing position. And, you've got a guy like Alex Bowman starting 11th. He's run really well here at Dover the last two races. He finished 3rd and 2nd. Compared that to what he did the year before that, 28 and 23rd. So he apparently learned something coming into this race. It transferred over last year. This track, they're going to use the same Goodyear tire that they used at Las Vegas, Auto Club, Darlington, and Homestead. Those were all tracks that Bowman did really, really well at. Temperature is going to be lower than it has been in the previous weeks. Bowman does better when the track isn't as hot and slick. Bowman could easily be a guy that moves into the top 5, and he's run so well with this tire package at those tracks. You may even sneak some Dominator points out of him.
Someone asked about Kozlowski on FanDuel.
He's going to be one of your off the wall Dominator picks. You're going to take Chase, you're going to take Denny, you're going to take Truex as your top lap leader, but then you add in Keselowski as that low owned second Dominator option. I've got him highlighted in the race sheets as a possible Dominator. Track history wise, he hasn't been that fantastic here. He's average finish has been 15.2 over the last 6 races, but he's averaging 35.5 laps led over those races. So obviously he's getting to the lead. It's just not sticking towards the end. So, you play him, you hope that the trend reverses itself and that he becomes a low owned option. Let me go over here to the projections. 14%. That's definitely a jumping off point where you can gain leverage on the field.
We're getting a lot of FanDuel questions. Love all the questions. Makes my job real easy. But let's look. In this question is Hamlin or Elliott on FanDuel.
They're so, God, they're so close. I mean, there's only a $400 difference. So really, what you need from one, you basically need from the other when it comes to Dominator points. I'm going to say that if you're going to choose one over the other, my heart says go with Hamlin. I think he's run better in this tire package. I do believe, yeah. I think we saw him win at Darlington. We saw him win at Homestead, at a quasi similar track at Bristol. He led over 100 laps. So this kind of track, it really suits Hamlin. And I think that if you're going to go with one over the other, it probably is Hamlin.
In terms of tier number 3, which is drivers in the 6K and 7K range, I feel like every week there's certain drivers in this range that we always talk about. Christopher Bell seems to be someone that we talk about a lot every week. Tyler Reddick is someone we talked a lot about last week. I know there was a question we got about Cole Custer in this range. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. we seem to talk about a lot. What's kind of Chris Buescher is another one that I know we got a question about. He's starting in the 12th spot. So what sticks out to you about this tier?
This is probably the tier that if you're playing cash or you're trying to fill out a couple of spots in your tournament lineups for place differential drivers, these are going to be the guys that you're really having to parse. I mean, you're going to have to debate, is Matt DiBenedetto starting 14th at 7,400, what's his likelihood to stay up front and end up with more points via finishing position than Cole Custer, who's $100 cheaper but has more place differential? Same thing with Tyler Reddick. He starts 16th. We know Tyler runs really well at these high-banked ovals. Can Tyler outscore both of these guys via the small amount of place differential that he has to gain plus his finishing position? You will go $100 below Reddick, then you've got Matt Kenseth, who has all the place differential in the world, starting 26th. But God, I mean, every week we have to worry, is some new mechanical thing, some driver error going to happen with Kenseth? So these are a lot of your drivers that you're going to have to really kind of weigh one against the other about finishing position points versus place differential. I got a lot of guys in this range that you could just easily swap in and out of lineups. I think my favorite, and you can play him in cash or tournaments, is going to be Tyler Reddick, because we've seen him run so well at this sort of track, and he's got top 5 upside because of that ability. And I can't say the same thing for Cole Custer. I can't say the same thing for Matt Kenseth. Definitely can't say it for Newman, Wallace, Hunter, McDowell. All of these guys underneath him. That Reddick's probably got the best ceiling out of all of these guys. But I could somewhat maybe make the case for Clint Bowyer too, who's run here pretty well. He's going to be a guy that nobody wants to play starting 4th, because he seems destined to just go backwards. But he's led laps here before. He's run well here, and with this race, Sundays, and then Daytona next week being only 3 races until the end of the regular season, Bowyer needs to ensure his position, and a couple of top 5s, top 10s this week, and it'll go a long way in helping protect that lead over 16th place.
I know that's something that you wrote about this week about, hey, there's only 3 more races left in the regular season before we get to the playoffs. And, and it kind of made me wonder is how much does that go into your thought process on how you're building your lineups when there's certain drivers who, A, have to make up some room or whatnot. Is that going into your consideration?
Yeah, it is, and it's something that we'll definitely explore tomorrow when we know where this field stands because of this race. Because we could see some wild swings in that 15th through 18th spots in the playoffs. And Reddick, for his credit, is only, I believe, 16 points behind William Byron for that last spot. If Reddick can sneak away with a top 5 here, and Byron just kind of hangs out, Reddick could really make a big punch a big hole in that lead and really tighten things up.
In terms of the tier 4, which is our everyone under 6K, one of the LaJoy is someone you've already brought up in today's show. Ty Dillon at 25, someone we tend to talk about. Daniel Suarez, I feel like the last 2 weeks has been someone we've really talked about a lot as well. I mean, and he's a highest price option this tier at 5,800.
Right. I've got Suarez listed as a cash option, but the problem is with Suarez is that he's kind of maxed out position wise where he's starting because of this new formula. Back when it was random draw and he was starting 37th, he was almost a bet, pick up 10 spots, and then maybe with a little attrition he can move forward. That was the bet on him last week. And surprisingly, that race was green. I mean, we had no cautions until no true cautions, that is, until late in the race. And Suarez, he didn't move up. He finished basically where he started. So, once again, if you're going to play Suarez, you need wrecks, you need people moving backward. And Suarez is, with his equipment, he'll probably. He won't be one of the first guys to get lapped, but he'll definitely be in danger by the end of the first segment. The 2 guys that are going to garner the most ownership in this spot, it's going to be Ty Dillon starting 25th at 5,500, and then the mega chalk Corey LaJoy starting 29th at 5,000. Same thing on FanDuel. Ty's only 4K, Corey's only 3,500. I mean, they're way underpriced. We're getting about $1,000 discount on Ty compared to where he's been. It's kind of the same thing for LaJoy. I don't get why the algorithm at DraftKings put these drivers where they are, but I mean, it's there. And quite frankly, if you wanted to build a double punt lineup with Dillon and LaJoy as the punts in every lineup on DraftKings, I mean, it's there. There is no reason not to. Ty can easily start 25th, finished around 21st, end up with about 25 points himself, hit that 5K mark. And then LaJoy, in these kind of similar packages, he's a similar package. He's been finishing about 23rd, 22nd. You give him 7 spots, he's going to end up with near 29 points today. I mean, that'll definitely pay off at that 5,000 K salary.
We mentioned at the beginning of the show about if you're going to go with with 3 dominators. You mentioned about on DraftKings you need at least 2, but if you go with a 3 dominator type of lineup of 3 drivers that you believe can dominate, do you pretty much you've got to take at least 1 driver out of tier 4?
Yeah, and I think you're going to be forced to take 2 because you're taking, you are forcing $32,000 of your $50,000 cap on DraftKings and just 3 guys. It is going to force you in this area. So I think that you're definitely going to have to play 1. And if you go with the rest of the chalk and play Austin Dillon, then you're definitely going to have to play two of these guys.
Just looking at some of the questions, one of the first comments, Nemarek Day.
When isn't it a Nemarek Day? Yeah, John Hunter is it's another question of DraftKings algorithm about why DraftKings continues to price this guy. He should probably be in that same LaJoy, Dillon, Gase area. We don't have any track history for John Hunter at Dover in the Cup Series, but if you look at similar high banked ovals this year, he's got an average finish of 19th. So, I mean, there's some upside there. When you look at his recent track history, it scares the bejesus out of you because you're seeing a bunch of DNFs. But you don't have to take you don't have to trust any kind of corollary between the Daytona road courses or Michigan. You can just say, okay, we know at Darlington, Homestead, Bristol, this is what we've gotten out of John Hunter Nemechek. Perhaps we can get the same out of him. I'm not going to fault you for that play, but quite frankly, I would just rather go down the 1,000 or even the 1,500 to Dillon and LaJoie, who feel safer at this point.
I know we went over this earlier, but someone had asked about this and didn't catch it earlier in the show, and Anthony asking about thoughts on Matt Kenseth.
He's a cash play, nothing else. I'm not really going to look at his track history here at Dover over the last 3 years because no races last year. Filled in the 6th car for Jack Roush in 2018, finished 20th. His last year at JGR 11th and 13th. So I mean, it's good numbers, but when I look at what he's done at the high banked ovals, Darlington, Bristol, Homestead, average finish of 20th, and that was with him starting 14th. So I think Kenseth is a floor play for cash and nothing else.
Rashad asks, he says, Austin or Boyer for DraftKings and GPP?
I think Austin. I'm not a fan of that salary. I think because of that place differential, which is what you're paying for, he's just got such a safe floor that you really can't say about Boyer.
Over on the premium Slack, we got Hoodmaster, love the name, says, who's your favorite driver not named Elliott, Hamlin, or Truex that would definitely want to lock in your DraftKings GPP?
It's got to be Harvick. I mean, we made the case for Harvick earlier. Over the last 6 races, best driver rating, most fantasy points, whether you're looking at FanDuel or DraftKings. He has a win here, 5 top 10 finishes, most fastest laps, most laps led. He's been so good here. And when, if we're using the 2018 races as our corollary, he led the most laps in both races.
Yeah. By the way, got to mention about, the NFL season's right around the corner. I don't know if you've noticed this, Phil. Training camps the pads are hitting. It was great to see the pads here in Tampa hitting this week. And, of course, that means fantasy football is right around the corner. And get an Awesemo draft kit for just $29.95. His projections, rankings, and the draft wingman, which you're going to need on draft night. So you got to check that out over at awesemo.com/join. And 4 new FFPC members get a $35 credit when you sign up for an Awesemo draft kit. So are you looking forward to football season?
Yes, sir. Got my home league draft next Saturday night. Can't wait.
Oh, yeah, man. You got to check out Awesemo Plus and get all those projections and whatnot, and be sure to get that fantasy football draft kit for just $29.95. Another question from Rashad. He says, guys below 6.3K who would be a good play for GPP on DraftKings. So we're looking at Michael McDowell, Ricky Stenhouse, Chris Buescher, Daniel Suarez, Ryan Pierce, Ty Dillon, on down the list.
The guy that is probably, we've already talked ad nauseum about Suarez, Dillon, LaJoie. Possibly Priest. Like, let me pull over here and see what he's done in this package. Okay. The Darlington, the Homestead, the Bristol, when you look at all those races, average finish of 23.8. So, I mean, that's so. The guy that really kind of intrigues me is Michael McDowell. You look at all these guys, 6,300 or under, he's got the best average finish in the field of everybody at 17.3. Now, of course, that came with him starting much further back in the field than 15th. But the hope is that McDowell can take advantage of this starting position, hold his place, not really be any kind of threat to get lapped or, worry about, putting himself back in that position, if he can just kind of hang around the lead lap, finish relative to where he starts, he could easily outscore everybody below him just because of that finishing position.
Next up, we get Logano or Kozlowski, DraftKings GPP.
I think you got to go with Brad. Ever since the return to racing, we've seen a lot more consistency and better driving out of Keselowski than what we've seen out of Logano.
I will tell you this. So since I started doing the show with you, I get a lot of friends who are like, "Okay, Jason, I'm starting to get into NASCAR DFS," and they're like, and I go, "Look, you just got to listen to Phil. Just listen to what he says." But for those newer NASCAR players, and maybe they want to put in a lineup today, how would you tell them in terms of how to understand NASCAR DFS a little better?
Yeah. Every race is its own unique snowflake, and it's always relative to how long the race is. So when it comes to races that are under 100 laps, you generally don't worry about dominators. When you get to 100 to 200, you start considering at least one, maybe two. Okay. That 200 to 400 range, definitely two. And anything beyond 400 laps, then we're looking at three, maybe even four. So this definitely falls in the wheelhouse of a two dominator build. It's so hard to pass at this track. It's going to be such an advantage for these guys that are starting up front. So you definitely start with either Elliott, you start with Hamlin, you start with Truex, and then you start building your place differential drivers around those guys.
Another comment from Slack says, didn't think we heard us discuss Jimmy Johnson. Thoughts on him today?
This is Jimmy's winning this track. Like, out of all of the places that he's won in the Cup Series, this is the place that he has won the most times. I believe he has 11 career victories. In fact, I believe the last time that he won a Cup race was at this race in the spring of 2017. Jimmy is a guy that you could look at possibly as like a partial dominator. Like you put in your two definite dominators, but then you could add in Jimmy at 8,000 as a guy that picks up some laps led, picks up some fastest laps, still probably finishes relative to where he started, and becomes a value, and because of those dominator points ends up outscoring guys like Bowman, Busch, Byron, all those guys around him.
Thoughts on, and this is a FanDuel question, by the way, thoughts on Almirola in this spot?
FanDuel is committed to pricing up Eric Almirola. I mean, they continue to keep his price up, but I mean, starting 17th, and Almirola has run relatively well here. And going back to those 2018 races, Eric Almirola was a surprise dominator in the spring. It was either one of those two races. But if Almirola's got his track notes to go back to, and of course we know he's been super consistent ever since Homestead. On FanDuel 10-7, it's going to be tough for me to pay 10-7 for Almirola when I can go up $500 and get access to Kyle Busch, who I can project to actually be a top 5 finisher by the end of the day. But in tournaments, using Almirola as leverage off of Busch makes a lot of sense.
Back over to YouTube, Reddick or Matty D on DraftKings GPP?
I'm going Reddick. I think Reddick will finish somewhere around 5th, 6th, 7th today.
I just get the sense he's in a lot of your lineups.
I have this unnatural love relationship with Tyler Reddick. I have come the full circle from thinking that he was a trash driver to just totally embracing the way that he drives. I am such a fanboy. Like, half of what I say about Tyler Reddick should be taken with a grain of salt.
I use a fantasy baseball analogy. And this is like the first year I've not played a season-long fantasy baseball just because we decided 6 games. Let's not do it.
Right.
We always talk about the man crush list. How you always draft somebody that's on someone else's man crush list because then you can trade them to them. So
Right.
is Reddick like on your man crush list?
Oh yeah. At this point, it's a wonder I don't have a fat head of him up in my weight room.
Oh, awesome. Andrew saying, guys in our 6Ks, we like. I know we kind of mentioned 63 and under, but I guess we can talk about under 6K. That obviously you've talked about Ty Dillon in this spot. We talked a little bit about LaJoy earlier. Anybody else that you believe is good options?
Okay, let me just go down the tier. Newman, I don't think he's fit for either cash or tournaments. Bubba, I can make a case for him in cash, but I mean it's not that sexy. Nemechek, we've talked about him. You're kind of hoping that what you've seen at these other high banked ovals transfers over today. Mcdowell, nothing but a tournament option. Stenhouse, you can make a case for him as either tournament or cash, but there's better options underneath him and above him. Busher starting 12th. That's a range that I don't want to get Busher in.
Next up, best play 7,800 and down. I would imagine that's obviously DraftKings question. Didn't say, but I'm guessing that's a DraftKings question.
It's got to be Tyler Reddick or Matty D.
Yeah, I'm just gonna order you a Tyler Reddick fat head. It's gonna just deliver. You're gonna know who it's from. Tanner says Kozlowski with Reddick or Elliott with Austin Dillon.
Woo.
So Kozlowski with Reddick or Elliott with Austin Dillon.
I think Elliott with Dillon.
Mm-hmm. Tyler says Matty D has also upgraded his car as well, so that looks good for him.
Yeah.
Tyler, John H. Nemechek has a sneaky record here. Finished third not that long ago.
Okay, so looking back at the Xfinity Series races, well, that we try not to put too much trust into those because the way the Xfinity cars drive versus the Cup, it's different. But that's a little ray of sunshine if you are going to play Nemechek.
This is a FanDuel question: Amarola or Blaney?
I'll take Almirola. I foresee a 13th to 12th place finish for Blaney, and whether that's FanDuel or DraftKings, neither salary works with that finish.
Yeah, I'm just looking at Blaney's ownership. Oof, not good. I guess if you were going to do a straight up contrarian play, he would be a contrarian play.
Yeah. Sometimes I think that DraftKings does these salaries because they are purposely trying to affect ownership, and I mean they did it this week.
Yeah, it's we got him at 2% ownership, by the way.
That is bananas. Like if you are doing 150 lineups today, I mean, crap, you can double the field at just 4% ownership.
Josh Bilicki has higher ownership.
Man, tough times.
I mean, look, it's if you're looking to play that complete contrarian lineup, I mean, and he want to pay up for playing it that much, I mean, obviously there's no one's taking him.
Yeah.
Eric Jones or Kyle Busch, DraftKings GPP.
Okay. Jones starting 13th versus Kyle starting 22nd. I know that there's
Kurt Busch.
Oh, Kurt Busch. Okay, Kurt's run here pretty well, and so has Eric. But God, Eric's a mechanical failure or a wreck, always waiting to happen. And this is going down narrative street, but we still have no clue where Eric is going to race next season. You know, there and the available seats are kind of drying up. Perhaps Eric puts together another good run today, trying to make a good impression, and you know he outscores Kurt just because he has 7 more spots to gain.
Andrew says, any love for Custer?
You're getting place differential, and we've seen Custer run somewhat well at these higher bank tracks. Like, let me pull over here. Because of what happened at Bristol, his believe that was the problem child for him. Yeah, because of what happened at Bristol, his average finish in these races it's pulled down. But well, actually, egg on my face. These 4 races, Custer doesn't even have a top 20 finish to his name.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe this year, getting used to the Cup car and these high banked oval, it's just not working for him just yet. And I'm pretty sure that if I look at what he's done over the last few races, 25th at the road course, 24th and 18th at Michigan, and then 10th at New Hampshire, 13th at Kansas, and then 2nd at Texas. He's just kind of been. I'm sorry, guys. I was looking at Tyler Reddick. Okay, so 22nd at the road course, 25th at Michigan, 34th in the first Michigan race, and then 8th at New Hampshire, 7th at Kansas. He's kind of been on a downward trend. So maybe the best thing with Custer is to just go down to Reddick or Kenseth instead of paying $7,300 for him.
Before we get out of here, of course, this race comes up here in 2 hours from now. Let's just kind of talk about those top drivers. Because you mentioned you wrote on Awesemo.com. People can check out your articles that you have up there right now. Talking about Dominators, and this is a race you're going to have them. 2, if you can get 3 in there, which obviously 3, you're going to have to look at some low-tier options. But, obviously you've mentioned about, the concerns you have about Ryan Blaney at his price point. But for the people just tuning in, kind of talk about those other top drivers before we wrap up this edition of the Strategy Show.
Okay. Whether DraftKings or FanDuel, the first 2 picks that are gonna come off the board are gonna be your Cornerstone Dominators. And because of our track history, because of the clean air, because of the high banks, it's a pretty safe projection that one of these top 3 starting guys are gonna be your top dominator. In fact, probably the 2 top dominators are going to come from these top 3. They have great track history. They've run really well in this package. Everything's lining up for these guys. It's just going to be a matter of who can outrace who early on, and then later on after we get established into the race. So, your cornerstones are going to come from these top 3 guys. And then what you do with that third driver, it's going to come down to, do you want to pay up for Kyle Busch's place differential, or do you want to side with a third dominator? Either way, it's going to force you into a somewhat similar lineup build.
Of course, if you want to get some of those premium tools we have over Awesemo.com, get a NASCAR weekly pass for $9.95. Get you driver projections, ownership projections, and that top drivers tool. So definitely something you want to check out here. Phil, final thing before we wrap this thing up. Actually, we'll get this question in here. We'll wrap it up on this. From Dakota, Almirola, Eric Jones, or Bowman, have to pick one for DraftKings.
I'll go with the cheapest option, Bowman, because I can safely actually project him to get to the lead.
And, of course, this race coming up here later on this afternoon. Appreciate everyone tuning in here to the NASCAR DFS Strategy Show. Be sure to give Phil a follow on Twitter at Race Sheets. I am at Jason_Floyd. I'll be back here later on today for the UFC Vegas #7 live before lock. But that is going to wrap it up for the NASCAR DFS Strategy Show.